Hello, and welcome to Politics and Prose Bookstore. My name's Sarah, and I'm a bookseller here at Politics and Prose, where we host a range of in store events along with classes and trips. So, before we get started today, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phone so as not to disrupt the event. And when we get to the Q&A portion, please line up at the microphone to ask your questions. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Sayantani Dasgupta celebrating the release of the book Brown Women Have Everything Essays on Discomfort and Delight. Born in Calcutta and raised in New Delhi, Dasgupta's previous work include Women Who Misbehave, Fire Girl, Essays on India, America, and the In-Between, and the chapbook The House of Nails, Memories of a New Delhi Childhood. She is an associate professor of creative writing at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, where her research spans creative nonfiction, literary fiction, South Asian history and literature, Indian cinema, world religions, fairy tales, folklore, and mythology. She holds advanced degrees in history and creative writing and has taught diverse classes globally, including in India, Italy, Colombia, and Mexico. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sayantani Dasgupta.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So many thanks to Politics and Prose for hosting this event, to the new friends I've made here in the store and who have told me that they will let me know if, say, Mrs. Obama happens to walk in. I will die immediately. So I've told them to let me know if such a thing should happen. Thank you all for being here. Many thanks to my husband for being here, who is, I call him the book manager or the book doula these days. So my plan is to introduce you all to my book a little bit and then read for a little bit, and then maybe we can have some Q&A. So the idea for this book came from the time I kind of moved to North Carolina in 2018. Before that, I was in Idaho, where I had moved in 2006 as a graduate student of creative writing. And before that, I used to live in New Delhi, my hometown. Now, New Delhi is a city of 15 million people on a good day. The University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, is not. So, suffice it to say that there were some cultural shocks along the way. And my first book of essays that came out during that time, Fire Girl, Essays on India, America, and the In Between, they were very much about this juxtaposition of being from India, coming to Idaho, what it meant to become a graduate student in the US, and what it meant to be in a city like Moscow, whose population was about 25,000 people. Some days more cows in the surrounding farmlands than actual people, and I had never been in a place like that. So, all sorts of things were at the heart of that book. Then in 2018, I moved with my new job to the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And within the first week of being there, I was at a faculty staff event. And this was during orientation week for new faculty. And two women in their 60s, two white women, said to me, "Of course, you got this job. Brown women have everything these days. Brown and black women get everything." So I looked at them, I looked at where we were, and was an event with at least 100 people, if not more. And I could see three people of color from where I was standing. And on hindsight, I'm grateful to them for saying that, because that became the title of the book. So many thanks to them. But it raised the question of visibility, because how was it that we were in the place we were? They were seeing the people they were seeing, and yet they made the assumption and spoke with conviction that brown and black women get everything these days. So that was very interesting and became one of the core sort of themes of this book. The second thing I would say is at the heart of this book is a discussion of place and history. Too many times I feel I have read books by even very famous authors, where I have felt not invited into the world. And this is true of particularly creative nonfiction, where I feel the author has assumed a very specific audience for their work. And this is not to say that I should feel invited into every book I read, but I think when we don't open up the possibility that our work could be read by someone we are not even imagining will read our work, we are doing a disservice to ourselves as writers and storytellers, and we are doing a disservice to this imagined perfect reader. So, in using place and time, I have tried to be very intentional that non Indian readers of the book should feel invited into this world I'm creating, but Indian readers should not feel like I'm talking down to them. Because that has also happened when I have read books by authors based in the West, that it has seemed they are writing so much for a Western audience that they have forgotten that there are other audiences in the world. So, doing that balancing act, that my reader is someone in the US, someone in India, someone in between, somewhere elsewhere, has been, I think, one of the most important things for me to consider when I was writing this book. When I talked about time, or when I say time, I also am thinking of being at a writing conference a few years ago, and the organizers at the writing conference wanted me to read from my previous book of nonfiction, Fire Girl. And when I was searching for something appropriate to read from there, I could not find anything because the person who had written that book in 2016 is no longer the person I am in 2024. And I feel that has been a really important learning step for me along the way, that we change so much over time, and to make allowances for that instead of holding on to what we think we should be or who we think we were to begin with. And this is a conversation that I have with my students of creative writing oftentimes, because often they will enter the program with a very firm idea of the book they want to write. And it's as if they change their minds halfway through the program, the universe will collapse. But it won't. The universe will meld itself and adjust itself and be okay with whatever book we want to write. So that has been an important consideration while writing this book. The third element, I would say, is travel and humor. So, travel is, of course, kind of inbuilt. I remember when I first landed in Moscow, Idaho, and I was helping a first year undergraduate student in the writing lab. And he said, "You sound funny. You're clearly not from here, not from here." So I said, "No, I'm from India." So he said, "Is that a real country?" And I thought he was joking. So I laughed. But he looked at me with complete confusion. Fortunately, we were sitting right beside a gigantic world map. So I said, "Do you see that diamond shaped big ass thing in the center of the world? That's mine. That's where I came from." And his questions did not stop there. He said, "So are you saying that Indians from here got up and left one day and made up a country for themselves?" So I said, "No, not that either. Countries should not really be made by just that impulsive decision to just walk up somewhere and get some land and call it your own. And this one has been around for a very long time. What happened over the period of my time at the writing lab was that this student, John, real name John, I'm not making up John just because it's the most convenient name to make up, real name John, he and I became very good friends. And it was as if he had never met anyone outside of whatever world he had grown up in. And over the period of time, he kept bringing more and more complex questions to me. There were times when he would say things like, "You know, for a foreigner, you're really smart. But if we forgot that, he was also exhibiting the kind of mindset we really want from all our students, this curiosity, willingness to learn, to engage, and then slowly realizing, oh shit, I should not have probably said things like that. So that became one of the most sort of rewarding experiences of my time as a graduate student at the University of Idaho. And in that first book, Fire Girl, I did not lean into the humor side of these experiences as much as I could have, because I feel like when I was growing up, the books I was reading by Indian authors, Indian women authors, they were not leaning into elements of travel and humor. So I feel subconsciously I didn't think we could. Even though my logical mind knows we can do whatever we want. Hey, brown women have everything, so we can absolutely do whatever we want. But I think no one had said to me directly that you should do this until I had a conversation with my editor for this book. And she said, your first essay is really funny in the proposal that I submitted. And she said, you should lean into it. So it was as if I needed her permission to realize that, oh, travel and humor are things I can write about. They are not sort of the territories for only one subset of the population. Anyone can write about them. Then visibility is already something I talked about. Sorry, identity is another theme in this book. And by identity, I mean identity as a writer, identity as a professor, identity as a wife. My husband is here, as I said, and he's of Indian origin, but born and raised in North America, which, according to me, does not make him 100% real, but he insists he is. So we'll see about that. But nobody tells you what these roles are until you become them. And then you kind of learn along the way what it means to be a professor, even though you have seen perhaps models of it in your own professor, or you have seen models of it in fiction or on cinema. But then I feel everyone has to slowly learn each of these identities. So some of the stumbling blocks along the way are definitely part of this book. The another element I would say is my love for languages and what it means to be a multilingual speaker. Something again I would not have known about myself had it not been the first time after our wedding we traveled to India, and I had to translate so many times between English and Bengali, my mother tongue, and then Hindi, a language that most Indians are required to learn, that it dawned on me that I'm a different person in each of these languages. And I think a lot of speakers of multiple languages know this already about themselves. But until I had gone through the experience, I had not realized the difficulty it is of wrangling all these languages at the same time. My husband also insists that I'm nicer in Hindi. I think I'm fantastic in every language, but he thinks I'm nicer in Hindi because and I can see it because Hindi was the language in which I talked to my friends when I was growing up. Hindi was the language in which I met with my first crush. Hindi was the language for all kinds of pranks in the neighborhood. And English was the language of competition. English was the language of getting ahead. English was the language used in school, in college, in my daily life here in North Carolina. And so the fact how much each of these have internalized themselves and the roles they play in terms of who I become when I'm speaking English or thinking in English versus these other languages, that has been a very interesting part of this process. And the final element of this book, and after that I'll read a short essay from this book. The final element of this book is my own love for books. I feel this is the reason I was put on this planet, to just read voraciously. And I don't think I would have realized that I could or I should become a writer if I hadn't read Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I was a 9-year old growing up in New Delhi. So I got it for a birthday. It was obviously an abridged, translated in English edition. And in my landlocked city, with no ocean, giant squid, whale in sight, just reading this and realizing that all of these things came from one person's mind and imagination was electrifying. And I think, had it not been for this birthday gift, who gave it to me, I don't know anymore. But I owe this person so many thanks, because without that book, I think it would have been, I would still have been a writer, I think, given how much I was reading. But the power of imagination, I think Jules Verne was the first one to unlock it for me. I'm going to read an essay called Chocolate Marmalade Green Card from this essay, from this book. And this is about the process of acquiring a green card that I went through with my husband a few years ago. And there's also cake in it. So that's all you probably need to know at this point. My husband and I got summoned for my green card interview on April 6th, 2016. We had been expecting it. Correction, we had been wanting it. An interview meant that the application he had submitted back in December 2015 had cleared its first hurdle. He had spent months on it, organizing and cataloging documents, including receipts of items purchased together, photographs of us clicked by others and ourselves showing the passage of time, postcards we had happened to exchange anytime we had lived long distance, forms detailing everything from my medical to academic to employment history, letters of support from our respective employers, friends, and former professors, wherein they vouched for how long they had known us, individually and as a couple, in what capacity, and that we are indeed stellar specimens of humanity. I also had to undergo a full health evaluation and attach relevant documents as proof. But I couldn't just go to my regular doctor. That was not an option. Though I had been her patient for the last 5 years, no, I had to go to one specifically designated for immigration purposes. He was an older gentleman, old enough to be my grandfather, and his clinic was 45 miles from our then hometown of Moscow, Idaho. To be fair, the doctor was a thorough professional. During the breast examination portion, a female nurse remained present in the room. Every second of their insistent prodding, I reminded myself to stay pleasant, to smile, and not show any outward signs of discomfort because I needed their approval to be able to live with my own husband. In the end, the total number of pages for the application came close to 350, the size of a full length manuscript, a book on which rested our futures. The evening before the interview, April 5th, my husband and I made the 2 hour drive from our home to Spokane, Washington. We checked into a hotel a short distance from where we were going to be interviewed the following afternoon. We were well acquainted with Spokane. We came here often, on weekend getaways, or any time Moscow's familiarity and small townness got to us. For two people raised in New Delhi and Los Angeles, respectively, Spokane scratched a little of the itch we felt, that craving for the big city where you can lose yourself in a downtown where no one knows you and you are just another face, anonymous, unremarkable, unworthy of a second glance. But this was not one of those trips. There was too much at stake. Too much. We had told my family in Delhi the purpose behind our trip, no one else. The alternative to my not getting the green card seemed too much to even contemplate. A marriage split between countries and continents? Surely, we consoled ourselves. It wouldn't be so bad. There were numerous couples who had it much, much worse. What if one of us had been in the army, deployed somewhere dangerous? This was fine. This we could manage. I would return to Delhi, get a job, live at my parents' home for a while. We could travel between India and the US during the holidays. We could chat via WhatsApp, send heart emojis on Facebook Messenger, give each other sloppy kisses over FaceTime. By then, we had been together for 8 years, albeit married for less than 6 months. We had survived serious health scares and nights stretched taut with concerns over jobs and money. Surely we could manage an interview. Inside the hotel room, I turned on the giant TV. My husband ordered us pizzas. I hated it, even though there was nothing wrong with the order. I sobbed into my slice. He chewed slowly, knowing full well it wasn't the pizza that had got me upset. Neither of us slept that night. We had read horror stories about couples being interviewed separately just to see if their answers matched. There was no room for error or forgetfulness. All questions were apparently fair questions. We could be asked anything so long as it covered our married life, whether in the bedroom or at the dining table. We held hands. I fiddled with his kara, the thick iron bangle he wears on his right wrist. The kara is one of 5 articles of faith for Sikhs, and they are never to take it off, as its purpose is to remind them to be good, to do God's work. My husband is not a religious man, but his kara means a great deal to him. It belonged to his late grandfather, an army man who fought in World War II for the British Indian Army and later for the Indian Army in India's wars against Pakistan in 1965 and 1971. In all the time we have been together, he has taken his kara off only twice. Once for a TSA agent at the airport in Las Vegas who refused to let him through without examining the kara, and the second time for an out of town wedding we had been invited to, and I had forgotten to pack even a stitch of jewelry. At least you can wear this as a bracelet, he had said, sliding the kara off his wrist into mine. On the morning of April 6th, I dressed with care. Navy pants, silk scarf. I even straightened my hair as if I had insider knowledge that taming my curls would be the way to win over federal officials. My husband put on a suit and a tie. He trimmed his beard and brushed his hair. This interview required both of us to be at our best. Our destination was a tall brown building stacked with armed guards and metal detectors. An unsmiling statue of Lincoln stood across the street from it. We had clicked selfies in front of it once, many months ago. After a short wait, we were summoned into our interview room together. The officer assigned to us was a white woman who looked to be in her 40s. She had a pleasant face, a ready smile. I breathed for what felt like the first time in 24 hours. She introduced herself and asked several questions about my place of work. As I answered, I breathed again. I had worked at my university for years. I had even been a graduate student there. I was actively involved in campus life. She asked to see pictures of our wedding. My husband had a set printed for exactly such a situation. He handed them to her, and she began going through them. Carefully, methodically, one picture after another, her fingers keeping steady beat. At a close up shot of our wedding cake, she paused. Her fingers stopped moving. I snuck in a quick glance at her face, then at the picture. Even here, inside this serious officious building, in its flat 2 dimensional avatar, the cake looked drool worthy. 2 tiered, chocolate ganache, orange marmalade in one layer, salted caramel in the other, topped with red roses and lilies, trimmed with a red and gold ribbon. I think I beamed a little with pride, maybe even hunger. Did my mouth start watering? Possibly. When was the last time I had really eaten anything? Had I even had coffee that morning? That cake looks good, the officer said, tapping her finger lightly against the photograph. Before I could reply, my husband said, "Thanks, it was my idea." Excuse me? The words flew out of my mouth before I could stop myself. He looked at me surprised. What? What do you mean it was your idea? It most certainly wasn't. I'm the one who suggested dark chocolate ganache. Really? I mean, come on. Who was this guy? What was he saying? Everyone knew dark chocolate was my favorite. Every July, I alerted people on social media that they should stock up on it because we had entered my birthday month. And it was important that they got me worthy gifts. And what was worthier than dark chocolate? And now here was this fellow taking credit where none was due. He had been buying me dark chocolate for almost 9 years. When we first got together, he used to say out loud to people without the slightest bit of hesitation or embarrassment that he loved white chocolate, as if it was a fact worth sharing. as if white chocolate was anywhere close to being real chocolate. It's not. And how about orange marmalade? I had been in love with it since I was 5 years old. My parents would buy Droog's orange marmalade jam for our home in Delhi. I would slather it on toast, taking care that the ratio of marmalade pieces to bread was disproportionately high in favor of marmalade. The more the marmalade, the chewier it was inside my mouth, thus resulting in greater happiness. I'm the one who went for the cake tasting too. Where was he? In Los Angeles, wrapping up work, sure, so he could return to Moscow and marry me. But I was the one actively living in Moscow, going to the baker, who happened to be the younger sister of one of my closest friends, sampling three kinds of cake and then choosing the one I liked best. I had done all the work here. I had eaten my cake and made sure others got to eat it too. I set about setting the facts straight. Listen, you have got this all wrong. I chose our cake. Left to you, you would have chosen something offensive, like white chocolate and strawberry. How long did we go back and forth? A minute? Maybe five? We stopped when the officer cleared her throat loudly and waved her hand. That shut us up immediately. Clearly, she had more questions for us. You can go, the officer said. Was that exasperation in her voice? A tinge of, I don't make enough to sit through this nonsense. Your green card will arrive in the mail, she said. She rose, shook our hands, and nodded at the door. Stunned, we gathered up our papers, our photos, and walked to the nearest taco stand. We took pictures of each other and our food. We stuffed our faces with carnitas and drank too much beer. We texted the good news and the pictures to my family. Before leaving for Moscow, we stopped at the Scoop, Spokane's best known ice cream shop. Neither of us remembers what flavors we opted for that day. But surely, as I unwrapped my scarf from around my neck to avoid spilling ice cream on it, I thanked the universe for creating both chocolate and marmalade, unaware that for years to come, my husband would continue to insist that it was his choice of cake that saved our interview and our marriage. The nerve. Thank you. I think now we move on to the Q&A. Okay. Happy to take questions if you have any.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
so much for the reading. It was lovely.
Thank you
I'm
for being here.
I'm really interested in this idea that people's personalities change based on the languages that they speak. My wife is from Mexico and she seems much happier when she speaks Spanish. And I had a friend who was German who moved to the United States and said he felt much happier when he was speaking English.
Mm.
And I wonder, have you always written in English? Do you write in any
Yes.
of your other languages? And what's that experience
Yes, I've
like?
always I have written in Hindi as well. I used to write in Hindi when I was a kid, but I think English always felt effortless in a way that Hindi and Bengali, my other languages, did not. And I am not unique in that way. I'm not exceptional. There are many authors from South Asia who write in English despite being bilingual, trilingual, etc. I feel that in the process of writing this book, I have learned two things about myself: that I want to get into translation work in the future, because if I don't use my languages, I feel there will come a time when I will not have any authority, any mastery over them. Second, I feel at least one book in my future I'm going to hope that I can write in a different language. It doesn't have to be a published book, but it just has to be for my artistic satisfaction, my individual satisfaction. It just has to look and feel like a book that I have written in a different language. And I think this idea of just being happier in one language over another, I feel it just each language's experience comes with so much weight. We have so much memory as far as each language is concerned. So I think that's probably at the root of it. That if your friend feels happier speaking in English than in the what was it, German? So I think that might have to do with, I guess, childhood experiences and so on and so forth. But really, who knows the right answer to this, right? It's whatever we feel at home in. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the essay writing process. What sort of sparks an essay, and how do you feel when it's starting to actually become one?
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question, right? When do we know it's an essay? I think for a lot of essayists, it starts with a question, right? It's a little jab, it's a little poke that, hey, I'm here, I want to be explored, I want to be understood. And so much of an essay to me feels like I'm just exploring. I don't know whether there is an answer to this question. I don't know what all avenues I will go into. My particular favorite are braided essays because they allow my mind to go into so many directions while also ostensibly talking about one central question. And they allow me to research, which is totally my jam. And I often have to come back and rein myself that no, we are just addressing one thing and not 50 things in this one essay. So it's only rarely that I have managed to write a complete draft of an essay in, say, one day. Oftentimes it takes much longer. There is one essay in this book that's taken over 15 years, I would say, to write. And it's not a particularly complex essay in terms of structure or construction. But that was one essay that got workshopped when I was a grad student in my MFA program. And one of the comments I got in workshop was, this essay will work much better if you didn't make yourself the hero of the piece. And I wasn't sure how I was going to write a personal essay without making myself the main character. And I would like to be the hero as well. Why not? I deserve it. So, but that comment was not meant to be friendly, I think. And because of the weight it carried, even though now I'm a professor of creative writing, I'm I hope I am conscious of my students' fears and concerns in the classroom. But that sentence, it will work if you are not the hero, just stayed with me. And it took lots of determination to even go back into that essay, which is all to say that I think an essay gets made when it gets made. And each essay is so different. There is one essay that, the only essay in my entire life, it's a Valentine's Day essay. It's in 14 short parts. And that essay like came to me in an hour, I think. And I wrote it and I sent it off, and I got an acceptance for it almost within the hour. I would like hours like that in my life. I don't have them, but I would really like them. So 1 hour, 15 years, it's like the entire range. Mm, hopefully, I will have a better control of this moving forward. Thank you. I think maybe we can take one more question.
Yes, I'd be interested in, when you came, and I'm a big Edward Said fan,
Mm.
and he always says everyone comes with preconceived notion about the other.
Hmm.
And how was your experience, seeing Americans or whatever Americans are?
Right. Yeah. So I came in 2006. At that time, I had researched a lot. I had Google mapped my exact campus. I had a sense of what the English department would look like, what my classrooms were going to be like. So I had a good sense of the town. And yet, when I landed in Spokane, Washington, which was the nearest international airport to the University of Idaho, I thought I was going to get kidnapped because I had never seen a baggage aisle that was just this. So I thought this was obviously not a real airport. This was where the plane had diverted itself and landed me because there was some nefarious intent behind it. And then the drive from Spokane to Moscow in the middle of the night was about 2.5 hours long. And there were no human beings or even evidence of human population anywhere. It was just farmlands. So I was thoroughly convinced that there was no university. There was something dangerous happening at the end of it. But I'm happy to report that the University of Idaho exists. Moscow, I think, is the center of the universe because of the incredibly lovely and kind people who live there. And I ended up not just getting my MFA degree from there, and it ended up living there for 12 years and almost refused to leave because the place was so wonderful and perfect. One thing I specifically thought Americans would be obsessed with was not Kim Kardashian, the other lady at that time, Paris Hilton. I thought you all would be civilizationally obsessed with her because that's who was most visible in our televisions as the American icon. Maybe it's a limitation of my own social circle that I've not yet made friends with someone who's obsessed with Paris Hilton. Probably I need to sort of expand my own social circles. It's my fault. But yeah, I haven't met anyone obsessed with Paris Hilton. And other observations that were really puzzling was the toilet paper aisle. The first time I went to Walmart, why do Americans need so much variety when it comes to toilet paper? And also so much variety in toothpaste. These were extremely puzzling things to me. So, of course, I asked my American friends questions incessantly. And they were very kind and gracious and answered to the best of their ability. Capitalism. But anyway, so thank you for that question, sir.
I think that concludes the program. Thank you all so much. Thank you for a wonderful conversation tonight. You can find the book at the register at the front of the store. And if you're able, we ask you to just fold up your chair and lean it against a bookshelf for us. And we'll start the signing line at the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.